There may be times, especially if you're looking to go in an investment direction, where you'll have to put off the paycheck much later, and where, for example, your wife or the people in your family may be saying, "Are you crazy? You need to make money. You need to be getting paid right now." But you stand your ground and you realize that no, the paycheck, the knowledge, the benefits are coming. I have to put in the time and put in the sweat equity now.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You will hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Hi Freedom Fighters. What are your rules for investing? If you are buying an investment property, do you just try and find a house that you'd like to live in and go and buy that? Or do you go by gut feel, what looks right or what feels right? Or have you defined a set of investment principles, processes and criteria that guide the decisions you make to ensure you secure the right type of property, structured the right way, in the right ownership structure, in the right location to achieve your long-term goals? Now, in my book, The Freedom Formula, I've codified the 8 principles for securing high-growth properties when you're in your accumulation strategy phase of your investment journey. I detail the 6-step property wealth clock process and the 6 S's in scarcity to secure the best property to suit your specific needs. So it's always interesting to me to compare this approach with the experience of others. And today's guest, Nick Raithel, is a good reference as he hosts his own podcast, The 7 Rules for Real Estate Investing, where he interviews a broad spectrum of successful property investors to distill their best investment rules. So I thought I'd flip the tables and get him to summarise the top 7 rules for real estate investing from all of the guests that have appeared on his podcast. And Nick's a very interesting person to listen to for another great reason. He's the founder of the 7-Hour book. Now, clearly he's got a thing about sevens. Now, this is a proven system that allows you to get your own professionally published book while spending just 7 hours of your time to achieve it. Yeah, you heard me right. Just 7 hours of your time. Now, I can honestly say that writing and publishing my books, The Freedom Formula, and now the recently launched Get Invested, are the best things that I've ever done. Why? Well, there's a whole bunch of reasons. Firstly, it really helped me clarify my thinking and much better communicate what we do and how we do it. The books have created thought leadership, authority, credibility, and much more respect in our industry. The book also allows me to get my unique message to many people at the same time and attract people who believe what we believe and educate them so that they're ready for us to help them. Now, the authority that flows from our books has created a multitude of media opportunities and some great speaking gigs. I can honestly say that the book has been the best business card I've ever had, and it's a gift that just keeps on giving. You see, a book is the ultimate way to share your insights and be recognised. It's an entry ticket to a much bigger game. Yet the issue is always finding the time to actually sit down and write it. Now, my book, The Freedom Formula, took 18 months of blood, sweat and tears from woe to go and involved countless hours, late nights, weekends, and a whole bunch of writing holidays, in quotation marks, which were sort of taken out sabbaticals to get it all done. I was effectively out of our business for 6 months to make this all happen. But if I'd known that it could have been produced using Nick's service with just 7 hours of my time, then it wouldn't have impacted on my role in the business, and I'd still have a great book that I'm proud of. Now, I know what you're thinking. Book's not for me. I don't know what I'd write about. No one would be interested, and I wouldn't know where to start. It's just way too daunting, Bushy. Now, I felt exactly the same way initially, but it's amazing what you know and you often take for granted that others would love to learn. And a book is the absolute perfect vehicle. For me, author is short for authority. So don't ignore this fantastic opportunity. And if you can work with Nick to do it using just 7 hours of your time, then believe me when I say this is an absolute no-brainer. So here's a great opportunity to hear the 7 top rules for property investing and learn how you can rocket your recognition by publishing your very own book in just 7 hours. So please enjoy Nick Raithel. Welcome, Freedom Fighters. Today we're in for a double treat. You see, I got to meet today's guest recently when I was humbled to be invited onto his podcast, The 7 Rules for Real Estate Investing. And I really enjoyed our conversation, which really got me thinking. You see, given that he speaks to successful investors every week, why not get him on to Get Invested to share the gold nuggets that he's uncovered to date? But secondly, as an author, I'm also intrigued with his very unique service, the 7-hour book. So welcome aboard Get Invested, Nick Raithel.
Thank you very much for having me, Bushy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, likewise, mate. Now, mate, very keen to have a chat. For those globally who don't know who you are, can I get you to kick it off by telling us who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do it?
Sure. So my name is Nick Raithel, and to your question of what I do, I'm the creator of a system called the 7-hour book. And the 7-hour book, what it is it's a system by which anyone, whether that's an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, can get their own professionally published book in just 7 hours of their time. So I'm sure we'll be talking in depth about what that entails, but that's a brief overview of it. And then in terms of that last question you said, Bushy, why I do it? I do it for a couple of reasons. One would be to help people who wouldn't normally have the time to get their dreams and their thoughts out, to get those dreams and thoughts out through a published book. And then another reason, another component of that is education. I am, as I'm sure you are, and I'm sure many of our listeners are, a perpetual learner. I'm always trying to learn and improve and unlock and uncover new sources of knowledge. So in the process of helping people with these books, me and the members of my team have the privilege of learning from people who are often the best in their field.
Yeah, love that, mate. That's so there's a double whammy benefit there. A big benefit for those that are writing the book, but also a big benefit for you in terms of your ongoing learning and development. Mate, I'm going to dig right into the book process shortly, but so that we've got a bit of a feel for your journey today, mate, can I get you to take us back to as early as you'd want to go and talk us through your life journey so far? And I want you to focus on your motivations. I want you to focus on where you've invested your time and your money and why to get you to where you are today. Can you kick that off for us? Sure.
Take one of the early formative experiences I had, which was getting the opportunity toward the end of my college time, university, I guess, as you guys would say, Australia, having the opportunity to travel. I'm originally from the United States, so travel to Singapore and spend the summer in Singapore working for the United States State Department, which is a large part of our government that handles passports, visas, and overseas travel, a number of other things too. But having the opportunity to go there and spend a summer working in the embassy. The reason I mention that experience, though, is because it really not only opened my own eyes to Southeast Asia, I'd never been there, but opened my eyes and illustrates the importance of all the most important things and the most important experiences you have that will help you to get places don't always involve money. And I don't say that to necessarily come at it from the idea that not everything in life is about money. I say it more from the standpoint that when you're getting started, whether that's learning investing or learning a particular trade, there may be times when you have to go in and do things where you're not going to be paid, or where you are going to be paid, but the paycheck is going to come much, much later. And that was for my internship that I did many, many years ago in Singapore with the State Department. It was not paid. And the plane ticket was not paid. The housing, none of that was paid. But being in that environment, being able to work for a government agency, being able to be overseas, being able to put that on the resume, that would be the payoff. So from an investment standpoint, you had to look at it. What was the ROI? And again, I mentioned that experience because I think that everyone listening to this, there may be times, especially if you're looking to go in an investment direction, where you'll have to put off the paycheck much later, and where, for example, your wife or the people in your family may be saying, are you crazy? You need to make money. You need to be getting paid right now. But you stand your ground and you realize that no, the paycheck, the knowledge, the benefits are coming. I have to put in the time and put in the sweat equity now.
Love that, mate. Yeah, that's a very big lesson to learn early on in the exercise. Nick, so talk to us about then what you believe the payoff was. So you virtually volunteered. So put up your hand and said, "Yeah, I'm in. Don't worry about paying me. I'll get my own way there. I'll look after myself while I'm there." Talk to us about where that led to. What was the next step? What was the where did you invest your time, energy, and money in as a result of that?
Well, from that experience, I went back, of course, to the States, completed university afterward, and then from there I invested my time in a number of financial service positions, ultimately leading, though, in a completely different direction to ad agency, a small boutique ad agency. And that really started to move me toward where I am now, having my own agency and working specifically in the book direction, because it opened my eyes to marketing well beyond just in the newspapers, marketing well beyond what you would see on TV, really understanding how all of it fits together and how it extends onto the internet with Facebook ads, with AdWords, and with all of the multitude of media that's come since then.
Yeah, okay. Where did the interest get sparked to go in that direction, mate? Is this something that the marketing side of things has always been a burning interest of yours, or did you come across something that's like, right, I'm really enjoying this? Just help me understand that.
Yeah, it's always been an interest of mine, marketing and selling, but it's also understanding that if you are going to succeed as an entrepreneur and you don't know how to sell and you don't know how to advertise, how to do marketing, then you're really not going to get too far. It's often said in the States, I'm not sure how it is in Australia, but it's often said that one of the best things you can do if you want to go into business is sell door to door for a summer or for a season and face all of the rejection, learn how to market your wares, learn how to sell. Now, in my case, I didn't have that experience during university, didn't have it during high school, so I had to find another way to do it. And in my case, it happened to be, fortunately enough, finding an opportunity to work at an agency and having my eyes open there. In addition, I also think that beyond just a working experience, becoming intensely interested to the point of reading everything I could get my hands on, listening to podcasts and media related to selling and marketing, that also contributed to it.
Yeah, okay. Awesome, mate. So you got involved with the agency, obviously really opened your eyes and got you excited about the marketing opportunities. Where did that then lead to? What was the next step from there, mate?
The next step from there was to ultimately form my own content marketing, not as much advertising, but content marketing agency, which, as we were going through that and as we were beginning to work with people, that was laying the groundwork for moving full-time to just books. So to just what we're doing right now with the 7-Hour Book, as I began to see that content marketing is great, and there are many, many different aspects of it, but the one that I've found to be most interesting and most rewarding, I would say, too, for our clients, has been with the books. Bringing into play the idea of books as the business card. I like to say this often, but it holds up so well. The idea of the book as the business card you don't throw away. The idea that there are all these other pieces of content out there, which each of them has their own place, each of them is perfectly valid in the right context, but books tend to stand often taller than these other pieces of content, and they last longer, for example, than a blog post, much longer than a tweet, much longer than a Facebook post, and they even give video a run for its money too.
Yeah, I would 100% agree to that, given my own experience in writing and publishing a book, The Freedom Formula. But mate, something that people used to throw at me, and I'll be interested in your response on this one. A lot of naysayers when I was in the early stages of writing the book would say, "Oh, well, no one's got time to read anymore. Why waste your time?" What's your response to that?
I would say I would agree with them 100%. No one does have time to read anymore. But, and this is the caveat. Well, there's actually two caveats, but I'll get to the biggest one first. Ultimately, and this is kind of absolutely, but ultimately, it's not necessarily about whether they read it. It's about the perception. Perception, as plenty of people have said over the years, perception is everything. And the perception, by the way, but the perception that you have a book and the fact that you are visible as the author, that ultimately counts in some cases more than what and it is sad. It really is sad, I think, as someone who's helping people with these books, and we're putting time and energy and attention to help them really bring some great value. But oftentimes people just see you have a book, and that's enough. Now, the second part, I said there was going to be a second part of the fact that no one really reads anymore, is that, yes, no one does read anymore. They listen. I know you go on the Amazon website, for example, and they say listening is the new reading. And I think that there's definitely some truth in that.
Yeah, interesting. It's in my own experience, Nick, there's no doubt that people now respond to me very differently than what they did before writing the book. As soon as there's an author tag there, there's an unconscious almost lift in respect. So I 100% agree in that regard. Then a lot of the people don't read the book. What I have found very rewarding, though, and I'll be interested in your commentary around this, those that have read the book, because I put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that. I mean, I've 35 years of experience and 18 months of pain to actually distill the exercise. But in doing so, the commentary I've had back in relation to how different it is to every other book in the real estate, in the property space, and the benefits that that's given them has also been a big boost to us and our business as a result of that. Have you had similar experiences with others that you've helped to publish their own books?
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Beyond the fact that they have it in the first place, which the importance of that as well, beyond everything we're saying, is that it shows that you're disciplined and that you're willing to put in the time and the effort. As you were saying, Bushy, in your case, 18 months. I mean, that's longer than it takes to have a baby.
Unless you're an elephant. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, and to be able to put in that kind of time, that shows commitment on your part. So there is that, and the part of what you were saying about people picking up and saying that this book is different, radically different than anything else out there. If you can have that kind of an impression on someone, through your book, as I have with my authors, and as it sounds like you have with your book, if you can connect with someone on that kind of level, you're instantly going to stand out, and you're going to build trust with them too, because they're going to see that you're not just hastily putting something together, just throwing together a bunch of pieces of paper, loosely binding them, and trying to pass that off as a book, that you actually have put in the time, and that you truly are an expert, and that you're enough of an expert and would-be authors to actually communicate something of value.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Now, mate, what do you say to people, because a lot of people have their own business or entrepreneurs, there's an obvious and very key benefit in writing a book in the terms that you've just described. But for those that are more what I would class as entrepreneurs, so career-minded, time-poor professionals who are in middle management and dedicating their time, or they might be medical specialists or those working in the resources sector who are working for big corporations, where would the benefit be to them in writing a book, do you think, Nick?
There are a couple benefits for them. The common theme, though, connecting is the word security. Ultimately, when you are working in a company and you write a book, you're making a multi-front security play. And that's a complex way of saying that you're building security on a number of fronts. First, you're building security to ensure you're going to continue to hopefully get promotions and to get advancement. Because if you write a book that positions you as an expert and it clearly shows that you know your field, your boss and your superiors are going to have a pretty hard time looking you in the eye and not promoting you and being like, oh, well, there's something came up and, well, maybe next time, better luck. I mean, they can't really, it's going to be harder for them, let's say, to not continue to advance you. So there's security on that front. There's also security on another front in the sense that if you do lose your job or you're let go or something happens and you can no longer stay at your current position, you're not starting necessarily from scratch. You have something showing that you've built up expertise and knowledge and already positioning you so you have your current position, but you have a book that you can bring to your interviews and to bring to the sessions you're going to get other work, and that's going to help open the doors for you. And that might even, if you don't end up going back to work at another place, that might even allow you to go on to a speaking career or to go on to some form of self-employment as well.
Very good point. And there'll be no better resume or CV than a book to stand out of the crowd if you're competing with others to secure another position. So, love your thinking around that, mate. Now, what the really intriguing thing for me, obviously, having sweat so much blood in producing my own book, the promise of the 7 hours with no work to produce a book. Talk us through that. How are you able to squeeze the juice out of the authors that you're looking after to minimise the amount of time that they need to put into this, but still produce a quality product that they can be proud of and has all the leverage benefits that you've been talking about?
Right. So the first thing I want to get clear on for everyone listening is that the book itself is taking much longer. The 7 hour part is all that our authors who we're working with, all they have to spend. All they have to do is come on the phone or Skype, Zoom meeting, whatever the channel of communication is, come on that for 7 1-hour sessions and talk with us. We, on our side, are doing everything else. And that is, of course, taking substantially longer than 7 hours to put the book together on our side. Now, in terms of what you were asking, Bushy, with the process, that itself is a very careful, very refined system of questioning and talking to them to pull the ideas out of their head and then synthesize them. So we go through that process of questioning them, and typically what we'll do is we like to take whatever their idea is for the book and see if we can't synthesize that into, say, 7 principles or 7 key points or even 5 points or 4 points, and then structure our calls so that if it is, for example, 7 key principles, well, there's 1 principle per call. Or if it's 5 key ideas, then maybe we'll do an intro call. We're working on the introduction of the book. Then we'll do the middle calls covering the 5 points. And then maybe we'll do the final call as a conclusion, kind of a wrap-up. So that would be examples of how we'd be doing the calls within this 7-hour framework.
Yeah, awesome. So it only takes me 7 hours, but you then providing all the resources necessary to go from those 7 1-hour chats into a fully fledged book. Awesome. Very time effective for those that are time poor, and most of us are in that regard. Give us an example then of someone that you have helped and the results that they've got from going through your process, and I'm assuming that then leveraging the book and marketing the book to the target audience is part of what you help them with as well. Can you sort of bring it to life for us with someone that you've taken through that journey and what they've done and what the results have been for them, please, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. Without, of course, violating any of my clients' confidentiality, would never do that. But we have worked prominently with a very large real estate coach. We actually work with a number of coaches, but this particular guy is pretty big in the States. And in his case, he's needed a book to help to expand his coaching practice, specifically formulating aspects of his marketing strategy, positioning him as an expert in certain types of marketing within his niche, and then to also have a book to guide those as coaches and as instructors for their group. So in the case of the marketing strategies, we put together a book around his style of marketing, and we did it through the 7-hour system, 7-hour book that we have. And then from the standpoint of marketing, one of the biggest things that we've done with that and that we've guided him on is getting reviews and testimonials for the book. That is critically important in terms of getting your book seen, discovered, and ultimately trusted. Because when people can see that the book isn't just out there, but that people have actually picked it up, read through it, and have favorable things to say about it, that's a tremendous boost to the book. Now, person seen and
sorry, Nick,
invited in.
Sorry, Nick,
to work.
Sorry, mate, just dropped out again completely there. Can you just go back to where you were talking about seeing the book? Just go back over that again. I'll edit this portion out so that it reads clean.
Okay. So in terms of them seeing the book and being exposed to its message, and ultimately being able to invite the author in to potentially do some consulting or even coaching with them and really boost his business from there.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, that I can really see the benefits there. The leverage side of the equation, I know when I wrote my own book that I now realise that writing the book was actually the easy part. It's actually getting the book out there, as you say, and getting other people to recognise the benefits of it, so that it's not just a book sitting on a shelf somewhere. What are some of the approaches that you've taken to help the authors that you've taken through your process to really leverage the opportunity and create that point of difference that the authors have been looking for?
Sure. Some of the ways to leverage it would be constantly be thinking about who the audience is and then write the book specifically for them. And I don't just mean generally, that we might be trying to reach trying to reach entrepreneurs who we're going to be coaching would be an example. Don't just generally think about that. Write that specifically with specific niches of entrepreneurs in mind. I think another aspect of it in terms of leveraging the book would be don't be afraid to give shout-outs to partners and to people who you work with or who could help promote the book. And with that, what you would do, we would do this with another, would be, in his case, he works with property management firms. They help him and his clients out. So we actually baked in, if you will, property management firms into the book, having them contribute quotes and guidance on various aspects of it. So now that they're actually in the book, it's sort of like they've gotten invested in the book with having quotes by them and having their knowledge and expertise in the book. So now they have a very strong interest in its success because that makes them look good. So they'll be acting first and foremost in helping us to promote the book and to get more people to see it. So that would be two examples I could give you.
Yeah, no, very good ones, mate. So it's being very clear about who you're writing the book for and then targeting those people and then getting them to recognise the benefits of it to then cross-promote it for you, which is awesome, mate. Excellent, mate. Well, look, I certainly got some personal interest in your service, given that I've got some plans to write and publish a number of other books in the years coming forward. So I'll certainly be having a good chat to you about that, mate. I want to switch gears a little bit now, though, and focus in on your podcast, which you were good enough to have me on recently. And a lot of our listeners are just thinking about what they can invest in, how they can invest, what are the things they should and shouldn't be doing. And no better person to talk to than yourself, given that, your 7 rules for real estate investing is targeting gurus in real estate in a whole series of spheres. So if you were to try and boil down the gold that you've distilled from the discussions you've had with guests on the podcast to date, how would you sum up your 7 rules for real estate investing?
Well, that is an excellent, excellent question, and it's going to be a very difficult one for me to answer, given all of the guests we've had and all of the 7 rules. But I'm not going to cop out, and I'm going to try to answer this as best I can. Of course, I would encourage all of our listeners to hear what I'm saying, but to who I think was probably the best set of 7 rules, which would, of course, be Bushy. Come back when his episode airs, and be sure to give that a listen. He comes off great. He was a great guest. But anyway, though, getting into the 7 rules, I would say one would be don't be cheap. And what I mean by that is pay the full price for attorneys, for building materials, for, if it's worth it, educational courses, and for whatever else you need to get educated and then to be successful in your investing career with real estate. We hear time and again too many instances, you see it too, of shoddy construction where they skimped on the materials and then later on it rains or it's too cold and the door isn't properly insulated, or you don't invest properly with an attorney, you try to cut corners and you end up getting sued for something you didn't even know to look for or know to read. So don't be cheap. I think that would be the first one. And with cheap too, I think it's important to know the difference between being cheap and being financially savvy, and just having common sense. So financially savvy and common sense is something as simple as, if you're not going to be in your office, turn off the lights. It's stupid, it's silly to say it, but that's being financially savvy and just having common sense. Don't leave the lights on, turn the computer off, other things you can do like that are just common sense and allow you to save money like that. Versus cheap is what I was just talking about with not paying the full price for attorneys, trying to skimp on materials. That would be cheap. Cheap is also, and I've seen this happen unfortunately with colleagues of mine, but cheap is you're at the cafe, you get caught there when it's raining, and rather than pony up a couple bucks to take a taxi back to the office so you can get right back to work, you try to wait it out so you can walk back to the office. Like, that's being cheap. So know the difference between those two, and when it comes to real estate investing, don't be cheap. Number 2 on the rules, I would say, is that it always takes longer than you anticipate it's going to take. So make sure that when you're doing your due diligence, when you're understanding how long other aspects of the transaction are going to be, that you budget more time than you probably need. Because it does always take longer. There's always more things involved. There's always steps you didn't anticipate. So just understand that. Related to that, as a third rule, I would say ask for more money than you need. I hear that time and again from guests who come on the show, this idea that it's easier, much easier, to refund your investors if you end up having money left over than it is to go back to them again and ask for more money. So it's much easier to just tell them, and you actually build trust with them too, when you're able to refund the money, because they like getting their money back. But you're much better off having to do that than to go out with your hand reached out again saying, hey guys, unfortunately our projections were off. We actually need this much more money. So make sure that you ask for more money than you need rather than less. Then number 4, I actually feel as I'm going through these like I'm on my own show, but we're on Bushy's show in case you guys forgot. It's still get invested. But number 4, there's always another deal. So if a particular deal doesn't work for you, don't be afraid to pass. If the numbers don't line up, or if you just have a feeling somewhere in your gut that this is not going to be a good deal, then walk. Don't be afraid to pass. Because as Richard Branson often says, he's talking about it in a business context, but it applies to investing as well. Business deals are like buses. There's always another one coming. And it's the exact same thing with deals in real estate. There is always another one. And if you can't find one, just keep looking. It's going to come your way. Just keep looking. Just keep getting out there, getting yourself into situations where you can encounter deals, because they're out there. Number 5, I hear this time and again as well from guests on the show, is the idea that real estate and real estate investing is a team sport, and you can't do it solo. And really, if you look at the numbers and you look at the trends, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone, nearly anyone, who's taken real estate investing to incredible heights in terms of success, who's done it by themselves. It just does not happen. And it can't happen, really, because you will need a lawyer, for example, an attorney. Now, if you're an attorney, you probably can't do property management yourself, so you're going to need a property manager. If you're somehow blessed with being both an attorney and a property manager, you're still going to need someone to do fixing up the property, to do sort of handyman work. Handyman or handywoman, I guess, more politically correct, but to do that kind of work. If, again, by some incredible stroke of luck, you are an attorney, you're also a property manager, and you're also able to do contracting work as a handyman or handywoman, and you somehow have those 3 specialties, you're still going to need additional people beyond that, because you absolutely, even in that case, can't do all of it yourself. So don't be afraid to reach out for help to others, understanding that real estate and real estate investing is a team sport. Going into number 6 of those rules would be never stop learning. It sounds cliche, but it is so true, because as soon as you stop learning, you fall behind on current developments, you fall behind on new technologies, for example, that are coming, that are potentially shaping or even wiping out entire industries. So never stop learning in that respect. And then number, I gotta say it, I hear this from guests, and it's unbelievably cliche to say, but it's true once you get in the game, and even if you give it some thought, is this idea of have fun. And, I cringe saying it. because again, it really is cliche. But if you're not, once you get into the thick of things, and you've put in your time and you've put in the work and you've got some momentum, if you're not having fun at that point, then you probably need to reassess what you're doing. So those would be my 7 rules from all the guests we've had, and of course from probably our best guest, Bushy, having him on the show. So those are my 7 rules right there. What do you think?
Mate, I'm firstly very impressed, mate. I put you on the spot with those questions. So to come up with those 7 straight off, very impressive, mate. And certainly everything that you were talking through rings true in our experience. And it's good that there's some commonality there amongst those that are being successful in property. I mean, I've been researching success for nearly 40 years now, mate, as a real interest of mine. And I constantly, it doesn't matter what industry, there's only 5% that ever achieve real, true, sustainable success. So the 7 rules that you've just shared there, it's certainly consistent with everyone that actually does achieve that 1 in 20 result. So very impressive, mate, and I'll send you the check for giving me a plug later, mate. But that's another story, mate. But appreciate you doing that, buddy. Now, mate, I want to sort of leveraging off the chat around investment rules, switch into your particular experience, because what I've noticed when we talk about those that are successful in the long term is that I see a difference between those that invest in work, career, or their business, and they tend to have a focus on income, whereas those that I see achieving true freedom also invest in growth assets that ultimately replace that active work income with more passive income. So I guess the question I'm interested in to talk to you about is, what growth assets are you or will you be investing in yourself?
Sure, that's a great question. I am, for all of our listeners out there, at the very beginning of my investment journey with real estate specifically. Now, if you want to talk stocks and bonds, I've definitely invested in savings bonds in the U.S. I invested in more of the Wall Street, more traditional kinds of assets. But in terms of real estate and property, I'm definitely at the very beginning of it. In terms of that, though, one of the things that has helped me to become interested and to really get going in it has been working with all of these real estate investors and essentially living or investing variously, if you will, through them. Having the opportunity, for example, to work with multifamily syndicators and see their deals as they're talking about them, and we're using them as examples in the books, and see as well things that they're looking at when they do their due diligence, and really kind of get a feel for the lay of the land through them. And hopefully in the future then, be able to start parlaying that into my own deals.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, and there's any sort of particular direction that, given I've sort of listened to quite a number of your podcasts, and you've sort of focused on investors that have a fairly broad range of interests. Is there anything in particular that's rung a chord with you in terms of where you think you will be sticking your money, and why are you feeling that way at the moment?
Well, I would say where it's not going to be. It's probably not going to be multifamily. Because as many people, I'm not the first to say this, but as many people are saying, multifamily is not only competitive, but also very near the top of the market cycle and due for a substantial correction soon, at least in the U.S. So it will probably not be multifamily. I like self-storage. I think that's quite good. I would love, though, and this is not traditional real estate investing as it's talked about, but I would love to be involved at some point investing in container ships and in shipping and potentially even in defense. I'm a firm believer in the idea that big, quote-unquote, boring things are how, as an investor, you make substantial returns. So whether that's container ships, whether that's huge infrastructure like toll roads, anything of that sort fascinates me. So that's where I could see, in addition to traditional real estate, getting involved as an investor in the future.
Yeah, that's some very good thoughts there. And I guess that's something that's worth talking about, Nick, to put some context around the equation. And I'm speaking here from personal experience, given that I own property in the States as well as here in Australia. But most investors, when they start their journey, like yourself, if you're looking to create a nest egg that will then ultimately replace your income and sustain your income and your lifestyle long term, there needs to be a focus on growth, because you're looking for the lowest cost, highest value, highest growth, and most affordable asset that's not going to impinge on your lifestyle, salary or savings while you're doing your thing, but is going to increase substantially in value over the long term. And once you've got to that point, once your nest eggs reach that level, then converting that into a ongoing tax-effective income stream or cash flow. And it's what I describe in my book as the capital growth to cash flow curve. And one of the things it quite often intrigues me with investors, they don't get a clear fix on where they're at in that cycle. So they'll go chasing cash flow early and then not realise that the nest egg's not going to increase in size to a point where they'll ever be able to stop work. Whereas the journey I like to help people on is focus on growth first and then convert to cash flow. And the cash flow opportunities that you've talked about, very high yielding, low cost, pretty much recession resistant. So, you've talked about containers, you've talked about storage, very good vehicles as far as the yield is concerned from a cash flow perspective. But I guess in my own experience, because in Australia we see capital growth long term average anywhere between sort of 7 and 11%, versus the States, which traditional property in the States, about 2%, I think, is what I saw in Texas when we were over there, and not a lot of growth generally. So putting it in and around that, does that change your thinking around what you're talking about as to where your focus might be when?
That's a good question. I would say probably not. I am more and more, as I'm getting into this, investing specifically for cash flow rather than long-term appreciation. But I think that the different vehicles that we've been touching on, specifically self-storage is one of them, are much more for cash flow. So I don't think it would change too much now.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's just interesting to tease that out, because there's the old question of capacity constraint, and I love the idea of investing in cash flow vehicles, but most people can only invest in so much, and then the income they're getting from it is not going to be enough to replace. Whereas if they put their energy into assets that will double in value every 10 to 15 years, then at the end of that journey, you've got a much bigger nest egg that you can then put into those cash flow assets, and therefore give you a much more sustainable and sizable income to free up your time and do other things. So, no, interesting, mate. I appreciate your thoughts on that score. Something that I always like to talk to people about, though, sort of allied to that, is what does your dream lifestyle look like, mate? Because what I've found in Australia, and I'm not sure whether it's the same in the States, but whenever I catch up with someone, that very first question I ask them, talk to me about your dream lifestyle. What are you doing every day, week, month, year? Who are you with? Where are you doing it? What are you doing? Because if we don't get clear on that, then what we're investing in doesn't have much direction or much magnetism. So talk us about your vision of your perfect lifestyle, mate.
Sure. I think one aspect of it would certainly be going to way more conferences. Conferences and live events where you're interacting with people are a tremendous opportunity to grow and to connect with people. And unfortunately, there are just too many of them out there, too many good ones out there to even scratch the surface of going to nearly enough of them. So I think one aspect of the dream lifestyle would be not every week necessarily, but a couple times a month or a couple times every few months, being able to go to much more of the conferences, whether that's investment-specific things or whether it's more broader personal development-related conferences, things put on by various gurus. I'm not going to name anyone in particular, but those kind of large, big events, being able to go to more of those, I think would be an integral aspect of it. As would more travel. I think more travel, and travel to the right places. Travel to the hubs of innovation, whether that's somewhere as traditional, it's funny to call it traditional, but somewhere as traditional as San Francisco when it comes to innovation, San Francisco and the Silicon Valley, or somewhere as untraditional as, say, Medellin, Colombia, where real estate and property is very interesting to watch. So being able to go and to experience places like that more often, I would say, is another aspect of it, travel.
Yeah, okay. Now, I know that from our previous chats, you share a passion for personal development, Nick. Talk to us about what that means to you and the sorts of things that you invest your time, energy, and money in around that whole personal development exercise.
Personal development, to me, can be summed up in the idea of when no one's watching, you're a mechanic. And I think that the mechanic analogy works because when you look at people who are mechanics, they're practicing their craft when, in many cases, people aren't watching. The people you see who, on the weekends and in their spare time, are off by themselves fixing a car or fixing a truck or putting a vehicle together, they're doing it because they enjoy it. So it's sort of out of, cliched word to use, but out of passion. And they're also focused on steadily trying to improve something. And that's how I look at personal development. I look at it as the process of continually trying to improve and, as a mechanic would, to tweak and to fine-tune aspects of who I am personally. So what that entails for me specifically is fitness and trying to improve mentally as well. And I think that a lot of our listeners can probably relate to that as well, whether that's in the fitness sense of going to the gym or doing intensive cardio workouts, or on an intellectual front of listening to podcasts like this one and reading books that they know are going to help them to get ahead in their careers or just help them to see the world differently in a way that's going to challenge their thinking. And as the saying goes, the pressure of that is going to turn the coal that they may have into diamonds and to help to refine their thoughts and to crystallize them into something much more valuable than what it is right now.
Yeah, so that's awesome, mate. So let's talk about the fitness aspect for a minute. What's your fitness regime look like?
Yeah, my fitness regime is specifically consists of lifting, then abdominal exercises, abs, if you will, and also heavy amounts of distance running. I'm a very enthusiastic and very active distance runner.
Yeah, awesome. What sort of distances do you run regularly, mate?
It's difficult to say. I found personally that works for me at least is not necessarily to measure the distance, but just to measure the time.
Yeah, okay.
So I'll take my stopwatch and, for example, when I am training for a marathon, I've done a few of those. When I'm training for a marathon, I simply base the training on can you run for X amount of time. So you figure out what your marathon time is going to be or how long it would reasonably take. And as you're training, you steadily make sure that you're running for incremental amounts of that time. So if you would run a marathon in, say, 3.5 hours, 3 hours, or 4 hours, you make sure that by the end of the training cycle, as the race is approaching, you can run for 2 hours, Then after that, you can run for 3 hours nonstop, then maybe 3.5, then 4, run the way up until the amount of time that the race is going to take you. And once you hit that point, you're ready for the race.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the relentless tenacity, discipline, patience, and persistence that's required to run a marathon, I'm sure spills over into your other endeavours. But given that sort of focus you've had on personal development over the journey, and I'm looking generically here, mate, across the board, what do you believe is the secret to long-term sustainable success?
I think long-term sustainable success requires a long-term sustainable perspective. And the idea that if you really are in it for the long term, you have to really be looking at it from the long term. And that involves, I think, zooming out a little bit, the idea of perspective, understanding that what happens today is important, but what happens today, it fits together with what happens tomorrow, which fits together with what happens the day after that, and so on in a chain, creating momentum. And there's actually a great book that I think our listeners should check out related to this, which is by Darren Hardy, and it's this book, The Compound Effect, illustrating the same idea that over the long term, it all adds up, and it all builds momentum, and it compounds. Everything compounds to give you the momentum you need to either reach your goals or to end up thousands and thousands of miles away from your goals. And investing is the same way. What is it Einstein said? I believe it was attributed to Einstein. Compounding interest is the most powerful force. And it really is. This idea of putting a penny away today, it compounds. Putting $1 away today, an Australian or a US dollar, it doesn't matter. Putting that away, and that compounds to just steady increments over time. And having, though, getting back to the first part, having the perspective and the understanding to recognize this idea of compounding, having that is what's most important if you're going to make it over the long term, I would say.
Yeah, it's absolute golden insight there, mate. And you're right. Einstein's attributed to saying that the law of compounding returns is the eighth wonder of the world. And I've certainly seen it active in our own personal experience and a lot of other people that we're helping. So I think you've absolutely hit on the head there, mate. And this is a great little segue into what I call the ambush session, Nick, where I ask you 5 quick questions that the audience loves to get your thoughts on. You've covered one of them already, which I'm assuming that the Compound Effect would be the book that you'd suggest people read. Is there any other books that you think the audience would be pretty keen to get their hands on?
Too many others, in fact, coming from the standpoint not only of our authors who we're working with, who we're constantly helping them and getting their books out, so they've all done great ones. I'd be remiss to single out anyone in particular, but too many good books out there. I think one of the better ones I've read, which if you haven't read it, Bushy, given everything you've been saying about writing your own books, you would probably appreciate too, is Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art. It's a fantastic book based around the idea that when you are trying to do any kind of creative endeavor, whether that's writing a book or creating some other kind of personal work, there is what Pressfield describes brilliantly as the resistance. These tendencies, whether it's your own personal tendencies or just sounds all metaphysical, and it is. It's just things seemingly conspiring to keep you from getting your work done. Whether that's the printer breaking or the phone ringing or sudden emergencies coming up or you suddenly feeling like, maybe I need to clean this. All these things, as Pressfield describes, that seem to conspire to keep you from getting done what you know you need to get done, your work. And it's a fantastic book. I would really recommend it to people, especially those who are trying to do a book or trying to work on some kind of a project for their careers that's going to get them ahead. They know they need to get done, but for some reason they just can't find a way done.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. The War of Art, it is a cracker. I love the way he's played. It sort of reversed the old art of war into the war of art. It's and that resilience to push through all of those little things that become very convenient excuses as to why you're not focusing on the big rocks is a cracker. Now, mate, as a flow on from there, what's your favourite quote and why? And it can be one of your own or one that you picked up from somewhere else. What would it be?
As with books, there's too many of them out there, but I can point you to one of them. It's actually from another investor, and that investor, of course, would be someone no one has ever heard about. It's a guy based, I believe he's based out of Omaha, Nebraska in the U.S. You might have heard of him, actually, Bushy. I said he's not that well known, but you might have heard of him. His name's Warren Buffett. And what Warren Buffett's quote on this was, "You can always tell a guy to go to hell tomorrow. You don't forfeit that right by..." And what I like about that quote is it illustrates this idea we were just speaking of perspective, of understanding that you may be feeling very strong and very heated emotionally about someone right now, but if you can just have the perspective to know that these feelings of animosity are going to pass and that they're probably, in all likelihood, just a temporary feeling you're having. And if you can just wait until tomorrow to tell them off or to vent, then everything's going to be so much better. So I really like that quote by Warren Buffett. It stuck with me, and I think that it's important for us to keep in mind.
It's a beauty. I want you to repeat it, mate. Just say it in its entirety again, because I think it's something that we could all take on board regardless of what we're doing. So just emphasise and reinforce that for me.
Sure. So the quote again is, "You can always tell a guy to go to hell tomorrow. You don't forfeit that right by waiting."
Yeah, it's absolute gold, mate. No, and I'm a big Buffett fan, and I haven't actually heard of that one, so that's a beauty, mate. Now this one's a little bit left field, but it's something that of real interest to a lot of hardworking Aussies, because most of us feel like we pay too much tax in this country. It's going to be a little bit left field given that you're in the States, but what's the top legal thing that you've done to pay less tax, Nick?
That is a bit of a left field question. I think the top thing I've done is simply find who I believe is the best person I can to help me with taxes, not trying to do it all myself. I find that person, pay them handsomely, and trust them enough to let them do their work and to help me to save money on taxes. I think that would be probably the best tip I could pass on.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree. Over here, a good accountant is absolutely worth gold, mate, in that regard. So, no, that's awesome. Now, switching back to the investment theme, what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received?
I think probably one of the worst is this idea of mutual funds and traditional forms of investment. Mutual funds, CDs, being a great place to invest for the long term. And that somehow, and I'm not really sure how this even got worked out, but somehow you're going to get wealthy, or at least to do much better than you are currently by investing in those vehicles. I think that's probably some of the worst investment advice I've gotten.
Yeah. And
in terms of the best advice, probably the best advice is to invest in cash flowing assets, whether that's real estate or whether that's other vehicles that provide you with a sustainable, long-term, steady, passive cash flow. I think that's probably some of the best.
Yeah, no, gold. Absolutely gold, mate. Excellent. Mate, sort of bringing it to close then, and looking back on your journey so far, if you were to speak to a school leaver, what would you advise them to invest their time, money and skills in to create their version of freedom?
I would say invest their time, money, and skills in finding the key people and the relationships that are going to get you ahead, and then figuring out what you can contribute to those relationships to make them work not just for you, but also for the people who you're going to be reaching out to. And when I say relationships, I think the most common application of that would be finding someone who you can work for free, or who you can help out if you're not necessarily working for them directly, but who you can help out in a major way in order to learn what they know to help them to reach where they are, but to where it's not just picking their brain, but it's actually providing them with something of value. So whether that is helping them, if you're good with numbers, helping them to crunch the numbers on the deal so you learn the real estate business that way, or whether that's in another career that you want to get into. It doesn't have to be real estate, but providing them with some sweat equity in exchange for getting mentorship and getting a leg up into the field that you want to get into. I think that's probably, if you're young, one of the best ways to invest your time, money, and resources. And understanding, too, that there are no shortcuts. That, unfortunately, the 4-hour work week, hacking, life hacks, all of that really is not valid over the long term. There are hacks that you can use to get by in the short term, but in the long haul, you do have to put in the time, you do have to put in the effort, and really, if anything, the best quote-unquote hack is simply hard work. Hard work is going to allow you to get by obstacles and to do much better than nearly anything else. And of course, hard work is not a hack. It's putting in the time and the efforts. So it's a little bit of a joke there, but you get the idea.
I love it, mate. That's the best description I've heard. Hard work is the hack. I love that, mate, because I've said the same thing. A lot of people are told you can do anything and achieve anything, and I absolutely totally agree if you do the work. So it's if you do the work that often gets left out of the equation, mate. So beautifully summed up there, mate. That's very sage advice, mate. Really enjoyed the chat. Some absolute gold that you shared with us across a number of fronts. And I mean, I think what you're doing in terms of the 7-hour book is just an awesome opportunity for people not only to increase their own profile, but just the process of going through writing a book. You learn a lot about yourself. You get much better at communicating what you believe and how you do that. So for those listeners, regardless of whether you're running your own business or you're an entrepreneur in working for someone else, I just can't recommend enough the personal and greater benefits you'll get from going through the book writing experience. And just don't fool yourself to say, well, no one want to listen to what I've got. Everyone's got a unique story. Everyone's got a unique take on the world, and you'd be surprised at how many people just love to hear that. So, mate, for those that do have an interest, how do they get in touch with you to take the next step, mate?
Well, I would say first and foremost, before you even get in touch, if you're going to, think for a second about whether a book really does make sense for you and your situation. And as I'm saying that, I hate to pour water on everything we've just said, but it could be, if you really think about it, that you don't necessarily need to write a book, that maybe your goals and your objectives are such that you can achieve them through other means. So I just want to be very clear on that, because there are people who are going to hear this who are instantly going to think that, I need a book, but you might not necessarily need one. So I just want to say that in all honesty. In the event, though, that people did want to, they do have that moment where they think and they really do take that gut check and they decide that, okay, a book does make sense for me. In that case, the best way would be to reach out through our website at content and that's spelled contentcorps.net, N-E-T, contentcore.net.
Yeah, brilliant, mate. And I appreciate you saying that. They're getting people to really think hard around whether the book is the vehicle that's going to help them personally and professionally is sage advice. But, mate, what's next new and exciting for you, and where you're heading, mate?
On the horizon, I would say, is, of course, more books that we're helping people to put out. But also, I've been thinking very seriously now, and I'm in the process of developing, of all things, a podcast booking service as a component. Because we've had a number of authors who have found that podcasts are actually one of the number one ways that they've been able to promote their book. So it's gotten me thinking that there has to be a better way to get people booked on shows. And I say a better way because right now there are booking services out there that handle podcasts, but many of them are unfortunately nothing more than glorified cold emailing services that use scripts that you could probably find yourself Googling in about 5 minutes. So having been pitched poorly by a number of these services myself to try to get people on my show, I think that there has to be a better way. So I'm exploring right now how to make that better way and hopefully to bring some value to people through it.
Yeah, I think there is a massive need there, actually. And in parallel with your thinking there, Nick, I know myself that the combination of writing the book and hosting the podcast, put those together, and it's 1 + 1 = 3. It's been awesome exercise because the authority comes through the book. That gives you the crack on the door to then attract and talk to some very high profile guests. So it's the old benefit of adding things together and then coming up with that niche that you're talking about that is always a challenge. You know, I go through this challenge myself, always looking to identify the right people and good people to get on the podcast, and it takes a lot of time and energy and effort to make that happen. So I think there's a very good niche there, mate. Fantastic, mate. Well, look, very appreciative of you spending time with us today. You shared some great gold there, both from the real estate front, thanks to me putting you on the spot, but also the opportunity that comes from writing a book and just continuing the life's learning exercise, mate. So I want to thank you again and really appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you for having me, Bushy, and you've been an excellent host with the in-depth nature of the questions. So keep up the good work on that.
Thanks, mate. We'll talk soon. Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's HELLO@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/get-invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.